First and foremost, let's go through the Twitter discourse. Everybody has been talking about how Hasan's collar is very similar to one with prongs, and as you can see here, a lot of these models that share these similarities also have numbers on the back, right? Usually knockoffs that are sold in place of these, if it's not directly from the e-collar website, will also have some sort of serial number or some sort of model number to identify it. In this case, we can see that it doesn't have that model number or identification number, however, everything else lines up. A lot of people will argue, because you don't see the prongs, it must be a vibration-only collar. However, when you actually go online and look up a large variety of these shock collars that are that specifically come from like one source, unless it's a knockoff, of course, you will notice that there's very, very few models that are vibration only. Keep in mind, as far as I know, this one right here is an RX-09 because there's two variations. The 300, there's two variations. There's like the EG300 and there's the PG300. The PG300 is non-shock, it's vibration only, and it's for medium to small dogs. The RX-09 only comes in shock, and it's for medium to large dogs. So even if you want to say that this is vibration only, when it comes to like manufacturing, I think it would be incredibly strange to say that a knockoff manufacturer, if this is a knockoff manufacturer, would specifically utilize a shock only collar instead of like utilizing a vibration model that already exists to knock off. So I think it's entirely possible in this case that the prongs may have been removed and then taped over, considering we don't see any sort of model number here. If we look really, really closely, there are some like weird indents here that don't match the bevels here. Yeah, send it to me, Nicandros. Is it your own editing, by the way? Because I don't want to use anybody's editing. I want to utilize people that I trust as sources. I was going to put it in contrast myself, but if you have better images, I'd rather use yours as a source to like, verify my claims. You can hear the dog whimper in pain. Okay, I'll look at your Twitter in a second. So let me show the comparisons real quick. Let me show you the website. I'll bring up a different theory later, but for right now, I want to utilize the website where this collar is presumably from, because this website only sells collars that looks like the one that Hasan specifically is holding in that image. So if we go to e-collars and then start looking through the models, you will notice dog temperament and put normal or soft. Normal temperament usually is always going to have a shock function. If you go to soft, there will not be a shock function on any of these models. However, all of these models have a very specific shape, as you can tell. They have a very specific shape, and it's all for very, very specific models as well. FE560, FE562, PG302, which only means that it comes with two, right? It's two paired with the same remote. PG300, which would be like, the non-shock version, F560 or FE560. They're all the same. They're all the same, like, or this one is actually not. This one does come with shocks though. It's all the same, like typically the same shape. It is all typically the same shape. It comes with shocking prongs as well as a flat back for those that are vibration only. If we go to, hold on, go to normal instead of soft. 302 small block forward, good one. If we go to normal temperament, you will notice that all of the collars for normal temperament do not have vibration only, and they are specifically this architecture of collar. They're wider, as you can see, top to bottom. They're wider. They do have prongs, and they have this particular shape in the back. The charger is located in the middle towards the bottom. And each of these, if you go down the line, it'll say vibration only on the listing. And you can click through all of these, and it will all say that they have a stimulation. You probably can't read it because my crop is cutting out half of it, but they will come with prongs. They will say that they have a sort of stimulation on the side. But none of them will be vibration only on that particular model. So, based on the lack of similar models that Hasan has, or based on a lack of vibration-only models similar to the model that Hasan has, I'm not easily convinced that it is a vibration-only shock collar. However, I do have a theory when it comes to the models that are available here, that perhaps he did buy one off Amazon that is very similar to this, that might have been an older model that was superseded by a smaller, less cumbersome model that vibrates only. And he could have bought, maybe a couple years ago, a model that vibrated only that looked very similar to the ones that shock currently. That is my theory. If it is a non-shock collar, is that perhaps he bought an older model that got superseded by a, more streamlined, lower weight, more slim model that is now vibrate only, and they stopped producing the one that he has that is vibrate only, if that makes any sense. So let me take a look at Nicandrous' Twitter, or Nicandrous' Twitter, and let's see some of the images that he's referring to. Or he could have just bought one same day off Amazon, true. These are very popular collars. They are actually all over the internet. A lot of people have reviewed these collars. A lot of people have talked about how these collars have been really easy for training and you can get them practically anywhere. Time to look at what model it was. The shape of the receiver's housing and remote all match up. The blue screen and the red button are there too. If he shows it again closer and there's no tape, no prongs that have been cut off with pliers, and it truly is just a weird vibrate-only model, that's the only way he's going to turn it around. I agree. Crying about Nazi harassment campaigns only appeals to the people who are already on his side, or on his side no matter what. Calling SUC's fans Nazis isn't the winning move. Yeah, good take. Good take by Nicandrous. Yeah, based on all of these images, it is just more like likely that he did put tape over it. It just doesn't seem like it isn't one of the shock models, unless there is a model that again was superseded by a slimmer, or by a slimmer model, and they just don't produce this particular shape in a non-vibration function anymore. Plus, I don't think people understand how easy it is to actually cut aluminum studs. I don't think people understand how easy it is to get a clean cut on aluminum studs. An example that I utilize, although this example can be argued against quite simply, is that if you take a bolt or a stud, not a bolt, if you take a nut and tighten it, as you can see here, right? Say, for example, he just took a random wrench to it, or even utilize a tool that it comes with, it wouldn't be aluminum studs. I would be inclined to believe they're aluminum studs. I don't see why they would be. Oh wait, because of electricity transference. You're right. They wouldn't be aluminum studs. Okay, but even then, if they weren't aluminum studs, if they were like any other any other metal, like I forget the various type of metals that some of these that some hardware is utilized for. They'd be tin plated copper. It could be, yeah. But anyways, even if these were steel, even if these were steel studs, it literally takes no effort at all to twist and over tighten the nuts to get a clean cut. You literally can just twist and apply a specific amount of pressure to get a clean cut on any stud. This is like this. If you've worked around cars, or if you worked around hardware for any meaningful time in your life, you know that literally all you have to do is just keep turning, and the stud will break clean off. It does not take a lot of effort at all. It does not take a lot of work at all. But at the same time, I'm not inclined to believe that Hasan would have would just know that all he has to do is keep turning the nut until the stud breaks. A lot of people think that it would be too difficult to do that. So it's entirely possible that he might have just taken pliers and then filed it down. But if we do look at the images here, specifically, we can see. Let me open the image in a new tab so you guys can see better. That there are some indents where the studs would be. There is no number. There is no specific model number here or serial number that identifies it. So it's likely that he did cover something up there. It is very likely that he did cover something up here. And the reason why I say that is because when you look at these models and reviews of these models everywhere, whether it be knockoff websites like Amazon, whether it be on the main website itself, whether it be on Reddit with people reviewing the product, whether it be on YouTube, it always comes with this on the back, which is just not visible here, unless it's this and he's covering it with his finger, but it's not visible here. No, this is just a charging port. It's not visible anywhere else. Based on the reaction the dog gave, if it was in fact shocked, it's not unlikely that the dog was wearing a shock collar, which seems very, very evident by these images. And it's not at all unlikely that he just cut off the prongs as well. So, I mean, it's really not that much of like an insane drama. It's really not that much of like an insane, discussion to have. Like, you don't really have to defend the guy that heavily. It is like each situation is more likely than not when it comes to stuff like this. It is entirely possible that he got a collar that is in this shape, that does, vibration only, that is no longer being produced in this shape, and instead got replaced by this type of model here. Or he genuinely did tamper with the device to get rid of the prongs by cutting them off, because they are embedded into the device itself. They're not just removable, by unscrewing. At least I don't think they are. So, what's the likelihood of him having just like an old model versus the new model that he tampered with? I'd probably say 40-60 if I want to be generous, if I want to be good faith. But the real argument here is, even if he did possess a shock collar, how unethical is it really for him to be using that to train his dog? How unethical is it really for, Hasan? Like what if his dog, unsupervised in the house, would be more of a danger to the dog than the dog just remaining where he is while he's streaming? Is questions that come to mind. What if there is nobody in his house that could like take care of his dog if his dog is a massive dog that it might have an unusual temperament? Hasan likely went to his local Harbor Freight and bought a bench grinder to grind down the studs, then used masking tape and used a Sharpie to mimic the matte finish. Electrical tape is glossy. Or he could have just genuinely bought non-glossy black tape, because sometimes you can't just find that. What's really confusing for me, even in the contrast images, is that the bevels here they don't look right. They just don't look right. What I really want to know is how easily removable these things are. I don't know if these, like, for example, these things could be removable as well, because some, at least in the automotive industry, which is somewhat of a background that I have, there are some things that are similar to this that can be removed as well by just using tweezers. There are some of these things that you can just remove by, like, spinning it, again, counterclockwise. So, and also, like, again, as I said earlier, because these are what I assume to be fragile metal prongs, all you would have to do is just, like, twist this hard enough for these to, like, break off, and it would be a very clean cut. It is not unusual for just to over-tighten a nut on one of these studs and have it break off cleanly. It happens all the time in many different applications and hardware. Literally, like, so often, which is why, places like Harbor Freight will sell double-sided studs specifically for reasons like these, because there are a bunch of different types of hardware that utilize applications like these that break often, because sometimes people over-torque and accidentally rip that shit clean off. It does happen frequently. But to me, it's pretty evident that he may have had tape on it. That he might have, like, fucked with it one way, broke it, and then put tape on it. It is just, I just don't think that there's a model like this one. I don't think that there is a model like this one anywhere else that is vibration only. I haven't been able to find one. Based on what we're seeing here with some of the indents that we see here, I think it is more likely that Hasan probably just grinded it down. Especially if it's like soft metal. If it's soft, like, conductive metal, he could have just grinded it off, in my opinion. Or he could have just used pliers, broke it off, and then grinded it off to get a finish so that the indents wouldn't be too obvious. Which honestly makes a lot more sense when you start really thinking about it, because why is the number absent? Why are there weird shapes when it comes to the back of the model? Why are the bezels odd? Why does it look like there are, some markings there that shouldn't be there? It makes significantly more sense that this could have been a shock collar that might have been tampered with, in my opinion. Big X doubt he'd remove the studs without using some abrasives. And even then, I don't see the shock function being present as that big of a deal. Yeah, I agree. I pretty much agree. What confused me is why there's circular indentations. Absolutely. Like, the thing is, I did a bunch of research on these fucking e-collars. I did a bunch of research last night on these e-collars before I wanted to talk about them. Because, like, for those of us who have worked, like, with hardware before, if you just snap the prongs, it would be flat. Maybe not necessarily. Maybe not necessarily. Maybe the things do protrude a little bit so that there's a good contact point with the base of the prongs. Because if we look at other images, so we look at this image right here. This is without the prongs removed. There are contact patches right here. What's hard to make out though is how much they protrude up to be viable contact patches. Is what I want to like figure out now. There are contact points here. I would assume that most devices that transfer electricity in one way or another would have to have accurate contact patches, or like good contact patches or good contact points. This is not the exact same model because it doesn't have the little button. As far as we can tell, it doesn't have the little button here. The shape is also just a little bit off. It doesn't have the little button, and the shape is I want to say smaller on Hasan's device. So this is not the exact same model. So who's to say whether it has these same contact points, but I would assume that they're like universal standards for these type of devices. So even the studs have a hex retention on the case itself to prevent the studs backing out when removing the caps. I think I pointed that out too. It doesn't seem like you could just like twist these around. It doesn't seem like you would just twist these around counterclockwise to remove them. But it doesn't mean that it's not impossible to remove them simply by prying them out or by cutting them off. The e-collar that I had prongs similar to these. Yeah, earlier I mentioned that it's entirely possible that there was a vibration-only model that got superseded by a smaller, thinner model that they now sell, which would be the what's it called, the EG300, as we saw on the website. But for the most part, there's only 2 models that only vibrate, and they both look very, very flat. At least on this website. And I haven't found any other model that is only vibrate that has the same shape that Hasan's collar has. So it is I think it is more than likely that he broke off the prongs. And even if you did have a collar that had prongs similar to these and it only vibrated, let's say that is a similar model, then that still means he broke off the prongs. If I want to be charitable to Hasan, I would argue that perhaps he does have a model that got superseded by this one, right? Instead of creating the bulky ones with prongs that vibrate only, why not create its own independent model that isn't so bulky, that doesn't have prongs, that has a larger battery, right? Which would explain why there's a different, charging port. So who knows? Maybe the one that Hasan has legitimately might be vibrate only, and it's an older model that they simply don't produce anymore because they decided to make a different model for vibrate only. And it's possible, depending on how long ago Hasan bought the collar. Maybe it's entirely possible that Hasan bought the collar off of Amazon somewhere, and it might have been a different manufacturer that didn't include prongs, that didn't include a serial number because it might have been some knockoff and it only vibrated, right? There's so many possibilities to this. But again, as I said earlier, I think in my opinion, it's 40% chance that it's a vibrate-only collar, 60% chance that it's a shock collar that he tampered with. But anyways, I don't really know what else there is to say about this. The situation is pretty much like that simple. You can be super, super charitable and just say that he didn't have an electric collar, or you can be, or you could be like also equally as charitable and reasonable and say that he did have a shock collar. But that being said, did Hasan shock his dog? Up to your interpretation. I personally think that it's a higher likelihood that he did. But anyways, that's it. No more Hasan posting. No more Hasan drama. No more Hasan drama. I got my segment.